trees.
In Ouachita National Forest, a 6-year-old wandered just beyond the lantern's reach. Minutes later, she stood at the tree line, unharmed, holding 3 pine cones and a feather. She spoke calmly about a tall camper nearby, though no one else in the forest had seen another person. It was April 14, 2020, when the first known recording surfaced. The audio itself had been captured 3 days earlier during a routine camping weekend. But April 14th marked when a mirrored copy appeared online. The leak begins with the faint voice of a young child questioning something just outside the microphone's range, asking why a sound is being repeated back to her. There is no adult response. Only shallow breathing and low-frequency interference appear in the background, similar to early signal compression in low-end wearable devices. The clip ends at 54 seconds. However, the cloud log tied to the smartwatch shows a recorded duration of 1 minute and 12 seconds. 18 seconds are missing from the beginning of the file, trimmed before the audio reached the internet. The file is not marked as corrupted. It appears to have been manually edited. The recording didn't enter the internet through cryptid or conspiracy forums. Instead, it was uploaded to a small camping safety group by someone asking how to recover full smartwatch logs. It wasn't presented as unusual, just a technical question about incomplete runtime on a child safety recording. From there, a compressed screen recording was copied into a Discord channel dedicated to unexplained vocal mimicry in wildlife captures. Multiple versions appeared within hours, each labeled differently. Some called it a child safety alert. Others labeled it a Sasquatch voice capture. None of the file names match the original cloud entry. What is confirmed is limited. A child's smartwatch activated its auto-record function. A second audio source responded to her speech. 18 seconds from the start of the original log are missing. No full copy has been released. The incident took place in Ouachita National Forest, a region described in trail reports as both openly used and strangely unmonitored. The area sits between officially marked family campgrounds and overflow clearings that hikers use when main sites reach capacity. These unofficial lots have no full-time ranger presence. Only a seasonal host monitors road activity, logging plates and noting when camps appear occupied. Cellular reception is intermittent, cutting in and out depending on proximity to the ridgelines. Calls connect clearly from higher ground, but drop suddenly once paths slope toward the creek corridors. The forest has documented black bear presence, though no recent attack records exist for that zone. A few archived forum posts from 2012 reference unusual branch knock sounds and low echo vocalizations heard at dusk near older logging cuts. But those posts were mostly dismissed by users familiar with barred owl call variants, which can resemble rhythmic knocks when echoing through timber. The family registered under a standard weekend pass. A permit photo briefly circulated showing 3 first names, Karen, Michael, and Emily, before remaining fields were blurred in subsequent mirrors. The mother and stepfather arrived mid-afternoon according to time-stamped social media photographs. Emily, approximately 6 years old, wore a lightweight LTE-enabled smartwatch intended for child tracking and emergency signaling. The device used an auto SOS recording feature that activates when either a loud sound crosses a preset decibel threshold or when the child moves beyond a set distance boundary relative to a paired phone. Their tent was positioned close to the southeast tree line with a battery lantern hanging from a branch about 5 feet off the ground, casting a limited circle of light. Beyond that circle, terrain sloped downward into a shallow ridge break, where pine needle buildup created a soft floor with almost no leaf crunch. 2 other families had set up camp within view, separated by roughly 120 to 150 yards, though their lantern light didn't reach the tree line. This spatial layout would later allow online map overlays to approximate Emily's movement direction relative to the audio source. The smartwatch was a commercially available unit marketed to parents of young children. It stores emergency recordings in segmented files, each capped at 2 minutes unless manually canceled. The auto record feature doesn't stop immediately when the triggering sound or motion ceases. It runs until either the user taps the screen, a stable signal is re-established, or the device's motion algorithm classifies movement as resumed safe proximity. Analysts noted that the missing 18-second portion was unlikely due to automatic timeout and more consistent with manual trimming or export limits. Emily's play radius extended slightly beyond the lantern's reach. No barrier existed, and soft pine duff masked footsteps. In later 3D map reconstructions, this silence suggested she moved no more than 30 to 40 yards beyond visible light, far enough for Karen and Michael to lose direct sight, but still within assumed safety boundaries. Scattered hiking logs noted that the area experiences temperature inversion pockets at night, causing sound to carry unevenly. Voices travel clearly downslope while remaining muffled when calling from below. Some early comments beneath the leaked audio referenced this, suggesting the parents might have been calling for Emily while she remained only partially able to hear them. As with most remote forest pull-offs, no permanent surveillance monitored the site. The only digital record came from devices the family brought, a smartphone with inconsistent signal and the smartwatch that triggered automatically. In the absence of external feeds, the smartwatch audio became the primary data point for what happened beyond the lantern's reach. The first automatic recording begins at 2021, according to the device log, triggered when Emily crossed the distance boundary threshold. She steps just beyond the lantern's visible range. The smartwatch registers a brief accelerometer shift consistent with gentle slope descent, followed by reduced ambient noise. The audio profile shows only footstep friction against soft duff and light fabric movement from her jacket. No voices are present. Background captures faint insect patterns and one isolated wind gust through dry pine branches. The audio stabilizes quickly, confirming calm, controlled movement. 3 minutes into the overall timeline, the audio shows a subtle drop in environmental frequency response, a common acoustic effect during temperature inversion near shallow ridges. Lower frequency bands flatten, creating a perceptible quiet space. Emily's breathing becomes slightly more audible, indicating she had slowed or paused. No adult voices can be heard calling. A second file begins at 2024, triggered by a short vocal emission from Emily just under the SOS threshold. Community waveform breakdowns show that just over 0.31 seconds after she speaks, a low-frequency response appears faintly at the bottom of the spectrogram. The pattern doesn't match owl or coyote signatures recorded from the area. Instead, it aligns closer to a delayed consonant shadow, a mimic effect where the responding sound mirrors the rhythm of the child's speech, but with shifted pitch and incomplete articulation. At 2030, audio captures a surface change. Pine duff gives way to compacted soil, likely part of an old game trail. Emily's footsteps become clearer, but no distress sounds are recorded. The responding audio signature doesn't appear again in this segment. The smartwatch shows a stable local recording profile with no dropouts. At 2033, a third recording triggers after another motion spike. 2 percussive sounds occur in clean succession with 1.7 seconds between them. In comparison tests compiled by users, typical branch drops show irregular timing due to bounce and roll. These 2 sounds remain evenly timed with minimal decay distortion, suggesting intentional patterning rather than environmental coincidence. The knocks don't coincide with rainfall or wind bursts. No third sound follows. Emily's breathing is steady throughout. At this point, Emily's estimated distance from the main campsite is 35 to 40 yards based on spatial mapping. No light from the lantern reaches the area. Terrain continues sloping gently. No predator sounds or wildlife alarms are present. At 2036, Karen made initial contact with local emergency services. Her tone was calm, the report marked as a precautionary welfare check rather than an active missing child emergency. The call summary noted she believed Emily had stepped just beyond the brush line, and that visibility was limited. No urgency codes were activated. Michael can be faintly heard in the background of the smartwatch audio around this timestamp, though too distant to register clearly. Despite intermittent coverage typical of the region, the smartwatch maintains a weak but stable connection. However, GPS embedding for these segments remains blank, suggesting that while cellular signal was partially active, location tracking was impaired by canopy interference and terrain angle. At 2041, a responding ranger, already on routine evening patrol nearby, activates body camera recording and arrives at the campsite. Only a 14-second fragment from this footage appears in the leaked compilation. In the clip, the ranger pans the thermal view toward the tree line. As the device runs a routine NUC calibration, the image flickers. During that reset, a faint secondary heat trace briefly registers near the frame edge before the image normalizes. The clip cuts abruptly. Emily was located seconds after the thermal sweep. She was standing upright at the edge of a shallow game trail, roughly 35 yards downslope from the main campsite. The ranger's initial observation noted she didn't appear disoriented or distressed. She was holding 3 small green pine cones in one hand and a single pale feather in the other, both gripped with steady posture, suggesting deliberate collection rather than panic. Emily made visual contact with the ranger before either parent reached her. According to internal field notes referenced in community summaries, she didn't run toward the ranger or call out. Instead, she remained in place, turning once toward the tree line behind her before shifting her weight slightly uphill. When Karen and Michael reached her, Emily made a brief comment about someone she referred to as the tall camper, asking if they were allowed to come back to the campsite as well. That phrasing appeared once in unofficial paraphrased notes shared online by users who claimed to have seen a blurred portion of the ranger's follow-up form. Official documents released publicly didn't include any mention of a second figure, and no additional individuals were registered in surrounding camps based on permit records. During scene documentation, Emily initially held all 3 pine cones. Before personnel could photograph them in her hand, she placed them down in a straight line on the ground. Personnel noted the placement appeared intentional rather than dropped. The line of pine cones sat parallel to a faint indentation in the moss. In those images, a subtle secondary impression appears to the right of the cones, consistent with a larger, flatter weight distribution. The 3 pine cones were bagged and tagged with rough GPS coordinates before being logged as non-critical physical items. No conclusion was attached to the secondary indentation. Emily showed no signs of environmental exposure beyond light dirt on her shoes and sleeves. Her smartwatch remained active, still running its safety monitoring process. The device had logged a final vibration alert at 2043, indicating proximity reacquisition to the paired phone when Karen came within 30 feet. The ranger's on-scene assessment didn't classify the event as a separation emergency. It was recorded as a resolved welfare check with no injuries or missing time. Emily's breathing and heart rate, based on smartwatch biometrics, remained within normal ranges. No elevated stress markers were detected in available log segments. Later that evening, Karen and Michael dismantled part of their setup, repositioning their tent closer to the center of the clearing. No additional calls were made to emergency services. Campsite records show they remained through the night and checked out at normal time the following morning. The feather, later identified as belonging to a regional bird species, drew less focus. However, viewers pointed out it appeared clean and free of debris, unlike others found on forest floors, raising speculation it had been hand-picked or recently dislodged rather than collected from the ground. Emily didn't provide any formal statement. No transcript exists. The only public reference to her description remains that single, paraphrased line from the leaked ranger form, later removed from circulation following takedown requests. After Emily was recovered, a brief sweep of the immediate area was conducted. The ground consisted of compact soil layered with thin pine needles and intermittent moss patches. That surface allowed shallow impression retention, but wasn't soft enough for deep, well-defined tracks. 2 distinct compression patterns were noted. The first matched expected dimensions of a child's footstep, showing narrow pressure points consistent with lightweight footwear and heel-to-toe distribution. These impressions lined up with Emily's known path and were spaced in typical walking rhythm. The second pattern appeared adjacent to hers at irregular intervals. It didn't display the same stride profile or directional roll typical of human walking. Instead of defined heel impact and forward pressure, the second pattern showed broader surface contact, as if weight had been distributed across a wider base rather than through sequential foot mechanics. The shape lacked clear outlines, only shallow oval depressions with minimal edge definition, suggesting heavier mass pressing downward in flat contact. These impressions paralleled Emily's track line for approximately 10 to 12 feet before fading into compressed undergrowth where no distinct impressions were retained. Amateur analysts later overlaid measurement grids and concluded that spacing of the secondary compressions suggested stride distance slightly longer than an adult human's average step length, though still within plausible range for someone moving slowly on uneven terrain. Beyond the last recorded impression, a small fragment of hair fiber was found snagged on rough bark of a low branch. It was collected and sealed under routine procedure. Internal labeling captured briefly in a leaked evidence sheet listed the entry as hair sample, non-human, pending classification. According to later forum discussions, the sample was sent to a state wildlife database but returned no species match. The entry was subsequently marked inconclusive and archived without further testing. The sample number wasn't referenced again in mirrored reports available online. A volunteer analyst later slowed down the ranger's body cam footage. In one frame, a thin, light-colored thread-like shape can be seen near the branch where the sample was taken. Image resolution is too low to confirm whether it matches the collected sample. Enhancement attempts only increase digital noise and artifacts. The Moss compression map generated by online contributors marked two parallel movement lines, one labeled as child path, the other as unknown. The unknown line showed less defined stride sequencing, with pressure appearing sporadically rather than distributed through consistent step cycles. Supporters of the mimicry interpretation pointed to this as evidence of non-human locomotion. Others argued that anyone moving cautiously without raising heels fully could leave similar marks, especially if barefoot or wearing soft, wide-soled boots. No claw, paw, or clear footwear outline was found. The impressions remained ambiguous, reduced to weight presence without identifiable footprint shape. Forest Service personnel didn't classify the impressions as track evidence. Official assessment referred to them only as localized surface compression, consistent with recent human or wildlife movement. No plaster casts were made. Scene preservation was not initiated. By the following afternoon, most surface disturbance had been obscured by wind, foot traffic, and natural debris shift. Once the audio clip began circulating beyond camping forums, hobby analysts extracted the waveform and flagged a specific point. At 22.4 seconds into the 54-second clip, later referred to as timestamp 0:22.4, Emily's voice produces a clear frequency spike. Just over 0.31 seconds later, a second spike appears on the waveform. Overlays show her initial vocal ridge as narrow and high frequency, followed by a lower, broader response signal that doesn't match her pitch or breath pattern. When metadata was extracted, a raw tag appeared in the hex log. Profile, unmatched, cadence, flagged. Community parsers noted that the device labeled the response event as User 2, a designation enthusiasts believe is applied when cadence doesn't match the registered profile. This labeling behavior isn't confirmed by the manufacturer and may not apply to wildlife or ambient noise. Spectrogram renderings show the response peak has an independent decay curve, rather than the softened trail expected from wind bounce or echo reverb. The event reads as a separate sound source, not a continuation of the child's voice. This moment became the core of what discussion threads called the cadence imitation debate. One side argued the second waveform peak was an environmental artifact, a micro-echo created by wind pressure across the smartwatch microphone, producing a delayed pulse that only appeared to mirror speech timing. Others countered that the delay fell inside the response window normally associated with human conversational pacing, noticeably tighter than the gap seen in barred owl mimic sequences or wildlife call overlaps. Breath noise in the low band during the return signal shows flattened airflow modulation, not matching standard human inhale-exhale rhythm. However, compression artifacts make that inconclusive. No official agency released a spectrogram. All available breakdowns are community-generated, pulled from mirrors of varying quality. Despite multiple recompressions, timing alignment at 0022.4 remained consistent across every known copy. Once the clip spread beyond small audio forums, discussion divided into distinct camps. Some classified it as a staged viral attempt, suggesting Michael had intentionally trimmed the recording to generate mystery around a harmless moment in the woods. They referenced the missing 18 seconds as deliberate editing to create artificial tension. Another group treated it as wildlife mimicry, comparing the return sound to known raven echo patterns recorded in mixed conifer regions. They argued the flattened secondary peak could be explained by ambient call rebound distorted through low-quality compression. A third cluster, referred to as the Cadence tracking crowd, pointed to primate mimicry studies documenting delayed rhythmic imitation behaviors. They used the 0.31 second gap as a marker, arguing timing alone separated the clip from the typical bird or owl response patterns. During this debate, a blurred image surfaced allegedly from a ranger's internal field form. In that image, one line read, "Auditory anomaly, non-parental source noted," before the rest was obscured by black redaction blocks. No verified source confirmed authenticity, but it circulated heavily before takedown requests removed most copies. Karen and Michael didn't respond to public inquiries after leaving the campsite. Michael's social media accounts were closed within 2 days of the leak circulating. The Forest Service issued a brief notice stating all audio involving minors fell under privacy protection classification and wouldn't be released in full. Takedown claims began targeting mirrored uploads across multiple platforms, citing unauthorized distribution of a minor's recorded voice. In response, online users shifted to mapping the pinecone evidence coordinates, tracing a narrow offshoot trail running deeper into the brush, away from established campground paths. In weeks following takedowns, a few small YouTube channels focused on trail documentation visited the campsite location. Their videos showed shallow duff impressions and moss patches, similar to those in leaked evidence photos. One hiker using a budget thermal monocular reported a brief cold gap in the same sector where the ranger's body cam experienced its calibration blackout. The footage didn't claim any encounter or discovery. Some users referred to this as a residual thermal mask, a known effect where a recently present warm mass leaves a temporary cold contrast void when viewed after a delay, though the device quality limits confidence. Analysts reviewing timing confirmed the response pattern matched Emily's syllable spacing twice, both within a 300 millisecond reaction window. No language was formed, only timing alignment. With no further recording and the missing 18 seconds unrecovered, the discussion narrowed to a single unresolved point. If it wasn't human, then what matched her rhythm so precisely?